Hey nerds, what's up? So I first read Wheel of Time almost a decade ago now, and as I started my reread for the show coming out, I read the first 3 novels, Eye of the World, The Great Hunt, and The Dragon Reborn, and I realized that my opinions about some of these things in these books has changed a lot. And I feel like that probably shouldn't be a huge surprise. Like, I left my 20s, I'm into my 30s. A lot of life changes have happened between the 10 years since I first started the series and reread now. And I thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about some of the things that I've changed my opinion on and how these books hold up. So I'll see you after the jump. Let's jump right in with characters. My biggest shock while rereading these books was Nynaeve. Now, when I first read this book 10 years ago, I hated Nynaeve. She bothered the heck out of me. I hated everything she did. I hated how angry she was all the time. I hated how she treated people. And this time I'm reading this book and I'm like, oh, Nynaeve's an adult. She's the only one acting like an adult in this situation. I think the first time my love for Moraine, who I still love, don't get me wrong, clouded my judgment. But now I'm like, yeah, this lady shows up and takes 4 of the kids in the town and you're supposed to like just trust that? No, of course she came after and was like, we're taking you home. What the heck are you doing? Like, that makes sense. So that is really funny to me. I love her right now. She's probably one of my favorite characters, which is so bizarre for me since I disliked her so much. Now, I know she is a certain way later in the series. Like, I don't remember a ton, so I'm expecting my opinion maybe will change or evolve. But as far as the first 3 books, like, I'm on the Nynaeve train, absolutely. So that was a weird change. I would really love to know if you read these books and then had a long time in between rereads, if your opinion changed on Nynaeve, because I do know she's a polarizing character. Some people love her, some people hate her, and I wonder if it has a lot to do with like what stage of life you're in. What's funny is my husband also reread Eye of the World in prep for the TV show, and separately, without me saying anything, he came to me and was like, why do I like Nynaeve now? I've never liked her before. She's like an adult. I was like, yep, every time she tells someone they're acting childish, you're like, yeah, you are acting childish. So it wasn't just me. I think that's really funny. Matt is someone else I changed my mind on, which I think is kind of interesting. Now, I always loved Matt later in the series, but when I first read the books, he bothered me so much. I knew intellectually that the dagger was doing this. Like, I remember my husband and I read them together the first time we read them, and he was like, well, it's just the dagger. You have to give him a break. But it still like annoyed me because I didn't feel like we had a lot of time with normal Matt, and then he became so awesome. And now that I have those later book memories, I just feel like really sad that Matt has this dagger and like all these things are happening, and I feel like it's so obvious. Like, why doesn't anyone understand it? So that was kind of interesting. Like, I'm way less frustrated with Matt on this reread and more just like sympathetic and can't wait till he gets healed sort of situation. Next, I want to talk about the love stories in Wheel of Time. Now, my first read through, I pretty much hated every single romance, and I don't really expect that to change. I think most Wheel of Time fans agree that Jordan's strong suit is not in romances. There are a lot of issues there, and I expect to still feel the same. And in some ways, I feel like they come even more out of nowhere than I remembered. Lan and Nynaeve, like, I guess I saw a little bit more this time because I was expecting it. You're like, did you spend a single moment alone together? Like, where is this confession of love coming from? It makes no sense. But the reason I'm talking about this one is what did surprise me is that before I hated the romance between Lan and Nynaeve. I was so angry at it. I didn't want it at all. And this read through, I'm finding myself amenable to it. Like, I don't like how it's done, but the idea of it I kind of like. And I wonder if that's because I now like Nynaeve, because I always liked Lan, I still like Lan. And so I wonder if that's my changing opinion on it. But this time I'm like, oh, I can kind of see it. Now, they do have a huge age gap, which you guys know I never love. And that was definitely one of the reasons I didn't like it the first time around. The one thing about this huge age gap is it's like a little different than some of the other ones that bother me, and here's why. One, Nynaeve is not a teenager. So many of these happen when usually the woman is a teenager, which just sets a very different tone. Nynaeve is 26, and like once you're into your mid to late 20s, early 30s, you're an adult enough to make those decisions. So even though she's kind of right on that borderline for me, it is kind of old enough where I don't necessarily feel like it's as creepy. Additionally, Nynaeve is just like such not an innocent or naive character. Usually this is like the older dude with like the naive young girl who's fresh. Like, Nynaeve doesn't come off that way. She's a very strong individual, very strong-willed. There's no part of me that feels like Lan would be taking advantage of Nynaeve. So I think that's why in this case, the age difference, although not my favorite, isn't something that necessarily bothers me. So I'm going to be curious if I still like the relationship later. I kind of remember really being annoyed with what happens with the relationship later on. So I'm very curious to keep reading that. However, on that note, Fail and Perrin is even worse than I remember. I remember hating their storyline later, just the whole way Fail acts. I won't say anymore in case you guys haven't read on, but I hated that. I forgot how Fail's the worst from page 1. I hate her from page 1. She's terrible. I don't even remember if I hated her as much, but she's so childish. I hate it. And Perrin confessing love for her literally comes out of nowhere. You're like, she's just been mean to you. Is this just like, oh, when they kick you, they like you? Like, it's just really dumb. And I'm just expecting to hate that. Perrin deserved better. And it's honestly one thing I really hope they change in the show if it gets renewed to when we get to meet Fail, that they just literally change. Like, if they changed her character 100%, I would be completely amenable. I just keep her name as the Falcon and change everything else and I would be fine. In fact, I want to know, does anyone like Fail? Please tell me in the comments. Does anyone like Fail? Because everyone I talk to hates her. And so I would just love to know. Any Fail lovers, come on, tell me why. Give me some love for Fail in the comments. But really, I'm ready to pretty much hate all the romances again this reread through. I don't think much is gonna change for me. I actually thought of maybe making a video called Hate to Tolerate and ranking the love interests in here, because I think the most I could say about any of the love interests that they were tolerable. The last thing that really surprised me was the pacing of the novels. When I first read Eye of the World, I remember thinking it took forever for the Trolloc attack to happen. I remember like really having to push through those first 100 pages or whatever, and it took a long time before I got interested. And so I went into it this time remembering that feeling and thinking like, oh, I gotta remember it's a really slow start. And I read it and I was like, this doesn't feel slow at all. Like the Trolloc attack happens really fast. And it's just fun for me because it's like, oh, in the decade since I started adult fantasy, I have come such a long way. Like it's been so unnoticeable, I didn't realize until I reread these books, but like 80 pages with nothing happening is just nothing to me anymore. That's just average high fantasy. You're just setting up a lot of stuff, like who cares? So the book went a lot faster than I expected, and that happened in multiple places. Places I remember being bored before, I was very engaged this time. So I appreciate that. Like, okay, my reading skills, I guess, have increased a little bit. In that same note, I found myself in Eye of the World appreciating Matt and Rand's kind of like city crawl a lot more. It's 100 pages or so, and it's the same thing over and over again. They get caught by dock friends, they move on, they get caught, they get move on. And before I found that really repetitive and boring, but this time I kind of appreciated the anxiety it induced. It was written to feel what they were feeling. And also funny enough is at the beginning of those chapters, you meet a guy on a wagon. Forget his name. And then at the end, you meet him again. And I was really confused because I was like, wait, they're meeting the same guy again? What happened? And I Googled and I realized that Jordan just wrote these chapters in a really weird like flashback within a flashback. And a lot of people are confused by that. Why I bring this up is that the first time I read it, I did not catch that they were the same name. I'm 100% positive because I did not remember that at all. So again, it was like, oh, I'm better at keeping track of names now in like a big fantasy. So all of that was like, oh, it's very interesting how my perception has changed once I've read a lot more adult fantasy. And I think that's often why some books work or don't work depending on how much you have read. But anyway, that's a different thread. The Great Hunt was way better than I remembered. I remembered liking each book progressively more, but in my opinion, The Great Hunt actually was far superior to The Dragon Reborn on this reread. I actually found The Dragon Reborn a little boring at times, whereas The Great Hunt was just like one cool thing after another. It also had some of my favorite scenes in it, you know, with the Seanchan and the Waystone. What's interesting is that if you had asked me what book those two things in particular happened in, I thought they didn't happen to like book 4 or 5 or 6. I was floored when they were already happening in book 2. I think this is partly like I forgot how fast-paced the first novels are before we kind of get into the slog, but also I'm wondering if I've forgotten a lot of the events that happen in later books, since a lot of my memories have already kind of gone and passed, and especially in The Great Hunt. So I'm super curious if there's going to be other books that I like more. Like for example, I liked The Dragon Reborn less than I remember liking it. I didn't feel like as much happened. So I'm very excited actually to keep reading and see which books hit me differently or better this time around. Overall, rereading reminded me of definitely some of the character choices that kind of annoyed me. For example, there's this running joke where like Rand, Perrin, and Matt are always like, oh, I wish Perrin and Rand were here, they're better with the girls. And Rand's like, I wish Perrin and Matt were here, they're better with the girls. And I remember finding that so funny the first time around. And this time I'm like rolling my eyes. I'm like, hey, it's not that funny of a joke. So there's just little things like that, or how the girls, Elaine, Nynaeve, and Egwene treat Matt at the end of The Dragon Reborn is just so rude and feels almost out of character. And I think there's a lot of little stuff like that, especially in interactions between the male and female characters, that are just like a little annoying, They were annoying the first time around. I'm noticing them kind of more this time around. And those are things I really think the show can do a great job of just softening, because there's just such good bones and so many good things that are happening. I am almost surprised at how excited I am to read the next books. You know, on a reread, there's always this danger of like, since you know what's happening, but I think I've forgotten just enough that it's exciting again. And I'm also excited that I still have this love for this series because it meant a lot to me when I first read it. So I've been very excited, and I want to know, if you've reread Wheel of Time, how did the reread go for you? Especially if you had a lot of distance in between your rereads. Like, what changed? I would like to know. I'm very excited for the show. They've made some changes, as you guys know, that I'm not a fan of, but reading this, I was like, okay, there are some good changes they think they could make in an adaptation. Either way, let me know your thoughts on rereading Wheel of Time and how you feel about it. As always, if you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. We're gonna be very Wheel of Time heavy in the next couple weeks, just because I'm excited and I'm enjoying the Wheel of Time surgeons. And you can also check out what I'm currently reading on Instagram at bookborn.reviews. I'll see you next time. Bye.